Aloha and welcome to this experience called Fix Bad JavaScript. The idea here is to learn how to efficiently use IntelliJ, ESLint, and our coding standards to find and remove problems in the JavaScript code that you create. You know, if you have a problem in your code, it's going to come out sooner or later. By this process, my goal is to have you find and remove those problems almost as you type them, which is, kind of the best time to find and fix it. So let's go through the instructions. First, we need to create an IntelliJ project called Bad JavaScript. So I'll go to IntelliJ and I'll create a new project, static web, next. We'll put it on the desktop, bad Bad JavaScript. Directory that does not exist, that's good. We want our projects inside new directories. So there's our project. And the next thing we want to do is set up the project to use our class coding standard. So you should click on this link and go through this checklist each time until you've got it pretty much nailed. The first thing is inside editor code style JavaScript. We need to make sure that we have this ICS codestyle.xml file there. And let's pretend it wasn't there. It's going to be there. But if I was going to import it for the first time, if I hadn't done this before, hopefully you all have, but if you hadn't, you can save the link, say, on your desktop. And then you can go into IntelliJ, and you can go to Preferences, Editor, Code Style, and then you'll see the scheme. And in our case, we have ICS code style as our scheme. But let's say we didn't. We could go to Manage, Import, IntelliJ ID, and then we can go in the desktop and we can find that sucker. Okay, so that's how you do it. We're not going to do it because we already have it defined. But you want to make sure that this is the scheme because it makes sure that as you type code, the spacing and the indentation and so forth will be correct. Okay, so that's already done. So that's how we deal with the IntelliJ preferences. The next thing is to enable ESLint and the Airbnb JavaScript coding standards. To do that, you should have already gone through this experience and installed Node, installed ESLint, installed the packages for Airbnb, and so forth. If you haven't done that, you should do that now. But having done that, then you should be able to, having created a new project, go to Preferences. In this case, it's Languages and Frameworks, JavaScript, Code Quality, ESLint, and we can enable that for our project. Now, each time you create a new project in IntelliJ, you have to go ahead and go here and enable ESLint explicitly. All right, it's disabled by default. I wish there was some way to kind of tell IntelliJ to automatically enable this when you're magically doing a project that involves JavaScript, but it doesn't happen. Okay, and you'll notice here it says automatic search. It's going to look for a .eslint.rc file to control which linting things are going to actually be. We've got to click OK here, by the way, to make sure that's enabled. So how do we do that? Well, we can go back here and we can see that we need to have an eslint.rc file in our project, which is what ESLint is going to look for in order to decide, well, what rules will it apply? And the rules that it will apply are the Airbnb base rules with a couple modifications for this class. So how do we do that? Well, one way to do that is to save this link in our bad JavaScript directory. And so I'm just going to do this. I'm going to save it. And then I'm going to go back to IntelliJ. And now we should see it in there, but it's not named correctly. So I can do a Shift F6 to rename it to .eslint.rc, and then I'll refactor it, and now it's got that little icon there indicating that it's good, and we can look inside, and there we've got the file that we want. Okay, so that's, whoops, didn't want to do that. So that's that. So now ESLint should run in the background and flag errors. We'll figure that out in a second. The third thing is these IntelliJ inspections. I don't have good luck with these inspections. I find that almost like 95% of the time these inspections do not flag things that are errors. ESLint, it's almost the opposite. 95% of the time they do flag things that are important that need to be removed. So my view is to disable this for JavaScript because I don't like to see warnings that I'm not going to fix. I like to see nothing or something I've actually got to work with. So the way we do that, if you haven't done it, is you go to IntelliJ IDEA, Preferences, Editor, Inspections, and then you go down to JavaScript, okay, and then you click that, and once they're all like that, they are all deleted. So we can say, okay, for the current project, we're not going to have any inspections for JavaScript. So we click OK, and finally we define the JavaScript version as ECMAScript 6. So we go to Languages and Frameworks. So Editor, Languages and Frameworks, JavaScript, and we click this to ECMAScript 6. I wish that we could make that the default, but I don't know exactly how to do that. If I figure it out, I will tell you. Okay, so that sets up the 4 things that set up our project to use our guidelines. And so now, going back to the actual experience, we're going to copy this code, and then we're going to create a file called bad JavaScript. Oops, bad JavaScript .js, and then we're going to paste that code into it, and then we're not going to see errors. So why is that? Let's go back to Preferences, JavaScript, Code Quality, ESLint. Okay, because that was not enabled. So let's enable that. And now we've got our errors. I guess I didn't click OK or something when I enabled it before. Okay, so now we've got ESLint running, and we've got a bunch of errors. Let's start to fix them. Okay, the first error says ESLint unexpected var use let or const instead. Well, how do we figure out what that actually means? And one way to do it is we see this error is no var, no dash var. So we could go to browser and type in ESLint no var. And what we'll find is that's the quickest way I know to get to the rule. And we can read about it and find out what this rule means and what we should be doing and examples of incorrect and correct code. Okay, but the basic idea is we always want to use let or const instead. So let's go back here and let's call that a const because I don't think we use foo again. And then it says foo is defined but never used. So how do we fix that? Well, I guess we could use it. Given that this is just, code we're just trying to play with the ESLint rules here. So in general, when you see a variable that's defined and never used, it's probably misspelled or it's a vestigial variable and you actually don't need it anymore. So it's a very useful rule in general. The next one we find is that the object literal notation curly braces is preferable to using new object. So again, you could read in the ESLint rule base about that particular rule and find out why that's justified and so forth. But the fix is actually just to replace it. Our coding standard says don't use double quotes, use single quotes. So let's get rid of the double quotes. And then we have obj is already defined. So what we can do is, I don't know, we can either rename this, but I can see that it's going to be used again down here. So I guess I could do something like that, redefine in these two places. or I could have renamed that one up there. Either way. Okay, car, expected property shorthand, object shorthand. Okay, well let's look at object shorthand. Just in case you haven't learned about some of this new stuff. It turns out in ES6, instead of doing something like that, we can just do something like that. This is shorthand for defining an object with the property name and value being the same, or the property name being the name and the property value being the value of that name. Okay, but all that boils down to is saying that that's the same and it obeys the standards. Here we have a property which is quoted, but it really didn't need to be quoted because the actual string literal was good enough for that, so we can get rid of that there. Unexpected string concatenation, prefer templates. So this is referring to the new template feature in ES6. If you haven't seen that yet, you should definitely check it out. It's pretty good. I'll show you an example of what it looks like. Instead of concatenating things together, you just have a single backquoted string, and then when you want variable substitution, you use this, these characters here to do that. So that's how you do a template substitution, and it looks much nicer, I think. Unnecessary escape character. So we'll click that to get rid of that, and then it says missing trailing comma. So our standard is to have commas at the end of objects, even though they're not strictly necessary. Car is better written in dot notation. Right, that's true. So we could place this by that. And then we go here, array literal notation is preferable to creating new array objects. So we can do that. And then we get down to here, unnecessary semicolon. So I'll delete it. Missing space before opening brace. Do that. Functions ob, expected to return a value at the end of this function, consistent return. That's pretty cool. So inside this if, we return something, but then if the if is false, we get to here and we're not returning anything explicitly. So let's just say return, I don't know, null. And that gets rid of that. Assignment to function parameter param, no param reassign. Okay, that's bad. So let's say let, param1 equal 2. And then it says param1 is defined but not very used. And also it's not redefined, so it should be a const. So let's just add this on here. We're really messing with the semantics of this, but at least we're getting rid of our errors. Foob is never reassigned, so that means it should be a const. And then I've got infix operators should be spaces, so I'm going to add some spaces here. And that line looks good. Expected triple equals instead of double equals. We always want to use triple equals because that indicates we're going to compare both the type and the value, so that implicit type coercion doesn't result in a true value when you maybe didn't want it. Down here we have arrow callbacks. That's a technique we might cover a little later in the class, but it's a nice way of making simpler looking anonymous functions. You can look up arrow notation for ES6 and learn more about it. Useless constructor, so that line is what is implicitly defined anyway, so you don't have to explicitly declare it. Duplicate name, get name, no duplicate class members. So let's get rid of that piece. And down to one last, obj, multiple spaces found before obj. So we delete that one line. And export, new line required at end of file but not found. Okay, so we always want to end a file with a new line. And so now we have, I think, deleted all our errors. Yeah, so we get a little green check mark at the top of the file, and that's what I'd like to see all of the time in your JavaScript code. If I download your project, enable ESLint, and then open a JavaScript file, that is what I'd like to see. Okay, so let's just go back here. Anything else that I needed? Nope, we got 24 errors. We got through all of them. So I hope you enjoyed this, figured out how to set things up. As you get more used to it, you're going to find it's really easy to do, and you'll just spend a couple minutes at the beginning of project definition, and then all sorts of problems will not occur for you because ESLint will have told you right away to get rid of your problems.